Welcome to Brightwheel webinar, everyone. Today's webinar is titled 5 Tips for Turning Family-Teacher Conferences into High-Value Connections. I'm Haiti, I'm on the Brightwheel team and your host for today. A little bit about me, I'm an educator, a parent of a young child, and I live in Los Angeles. Before we get started, let's do a quick introduction to Brightwheel. We're the #1 rated app for early educators. As you can see from the screen, Brightwheel is an all-in-one solution to help you manage your center or preschool more effectively. With Brightwheel, you'll be able to communicate with families, share photos and videos to give them a window into their child's day. You'll be able to check children in and out, and that means no more tracking families down for missing signatures. And you'll be able to manage your admissions work and even collect tuition online, which are huge time savers for both admins and families alike. So improve family satisfaction, give your teachers more time with their children in the classroom, and most importantly, operate with less stress. And I also want to share a little bit more about Brightwheel's newest learning feature, and that is Experience Curriculum. It's an easy to implement curriculum system that comes with digital lesson plans available in the app and hands-on learning materials mailed to your program. It's designed around 35 research-based skills to improve learning outcomes for the children, flexible lesson plans for babies, toddlers, and preschool age groups, and it's aligned with NAEYC, Common Core, and Head Start on all 50 state early learning standards. You can easily share the children's developmental progress with families. And as you can see, our goal really here is to make life easier inside and outside of the classroom for you and your teachers. Some housekeeping notes for you all for today. We will email you the recording of today's webinar, so don't worry if you need to leave early for any reason, pick up the phone or attend to a child. You can rewatch at any time, and you can forward to any colleagues who couldn't make it today but who would benefit from this training. You should also have this recording by tomorrow at the very latest, so check your email for that. And we will be doing a live Q&A session so that you can get your questions answered. So use that Q&A button on your Zoom control, which is separate from the chat, so that way we can make sure to see your questions and get them answered, hopefully. At the end of the webinar, you'll be given a certificate of attendance. So whether you're watching now or sometime in the future, just watch all the way until the end and we'll give you that link. And then there will also be a blank spot on that certificate so you can fill in your own name. You can print it for your records or save it and download it. Okay, let's go over our agenda. In a few minutes, we'll jump into our main presentation. We'll make time for a live Q&A question session. And then following that, we'll do a quick wrap up where I'll share your certificate of attendance with you. And then we'll be on our way for the rest of the day. As educators, we put so much effort into preparing for conferences, what to say, how to say succinctly, and it can feel overwhelming talking to family after family with sometimes no real connection with the family on the other side of that desk or that table, right? And maybe you have even felt at times that those conversations are one-sided. So turning family-teacher conferences into high-value connections with families is all about building relationships, like so many of you said earlier during our icebreaker. But those relationship building has to happen before conferences, during conferences, and after conferences. So today we'll be talking about how to re-energize your conferences to make sure that you are using them to strengthen relationships with families. So our first tip is to rethink your current family-teacher conference structure. I think most of us instinctively know that there's something that we can improve, but it's not always easy to identify it. And even when you know what needs improving, sometimes it's challenging to actually take those steps to make those necessary changes. My advice here is to reflect on what's working well and what's not. Take that first step of that reflection on your own. And then after you've done your reflection, ask some key teachers who are maybe veterans or new to your program, and some parents to provide feedback on what's currently working and not working with your family teacher conferences. Here's some ideas for areas that you may want to reflect and rethink when it comes to conferences. You may want to reflect and rethink the frequency and timing of your conferences. What would it look like for your conference to be shorter or longer? Should it happen 1 time a year, 2 times a year, 3 times a year? The location, what if it wasn't in the classroom? What possibilities does that open up for you for it to be in a different location? The forms, are the forms capturing all the information that you need to share with families? Is it a form that guides you during the actual conference in your conversation with the family? Do you have an agenda? And if you do, how do you open up that conference and how do you close the conference? Is it working for you and for the families? And then lastly, I just want to throw out there the name of the actual conference. We've traditionally called it family teacher conferences, parent teacher conferences, and I'm sure there's many other variations out there that you may be using currently. But what if we were to call it a conversation or a chat? Would that change how families and teachers approach the conversation and prepare for it? So these are all questions that you want to ask yourselves as you're thinking about what am I currently doing today and how can we improve it moving forward? So I believe in making our webinars as fun and as interactive as possible. I also recognize that I don't have all the answers, and I love to make space for us to learn from each other as a community of educators. So throughout the webinar, we'll be asking questions so that you have the opportunity to share your experiences, as well as learn from all the experiences and wisdom in this virtual room. So with that said, I want to ask our first question. How long are your family teacher conferences today? Okay, so I'm seeing a variation of answers, and this is great. This is why I love doing this, because you'll see how much we have in common and how things are very different across different centers. And there's no right or wrong answer. Every conference, family conference structure really should be meeting your family's needs and your teacher's needs. So thank you for sharing openly. So I'm seeing 10 to 15 minutes. I'm seeing 30 minutes, about 20 minutes. I'm seeing an hour. Yep. So you can see anywhere between 15 minutes to an hour. This is just so fascinating. Some folks are even saying they don't have a time limit. Okay, so yeah, so you can see that there's a lot of changes and ranges in ways that folks approach family teacher conferences, and it's always fascinating to see this. So that way we can get a sense for where we stand, right? Are we on average, above average? What does that look like? Okay, well, thank you for sharing, and keep those answers coming as you think of new things and comments that you want to share. So before we dive into the actual ideas that we want to try, I want to orient you on the slide that you'll be seeing time and time again as we move through our 5 tips for the day. On the left, we'll discuss goals and ideas for you to consider or adopt in your program. On the right, you'll see how Brightwheel can help. I won't always have a chance to go in depth on the tips and resources, but I do want you to know that you'll receive this presentation afterwards, and you'll also have the opportunity to rewatch if you want to revisit any tips. You'll also notice in this section on the left here, it is titled On Track or Revamp. As you are reviewing the information with me, this is a time to reflect. Are you on track? Meaning, are you doing everything or something similar to what you're seeing listed here? Or do you need to revamp your current family teacher conferences structure? If you're on track, consider this as a time of affirmation. You're doing an amazing job. And just please continue to speak to your experience and tips in the chat. We can all learn from you. And if you're looking to revamp your family teacher conference structure, these are goals and ideas that offer practical steps to get you started. So let's get started with the 3 goals that I have here. Number 1, you want to ensure that conferences are meaningful for families and your staff. It can't just be one or the other. It has to be both for it to actually be something that works for everybody. Number 2 is to get teachers a buy-in on new conference formats. Whenever you're making any changes to any structure, especially since teachers are at the forefront of leading these conferences, make sure that you have their buy-in, their opinions, their ideas, their feedback before making any changes. The third is our goal is to move from just updating families on their children's developmental progress and really turn towards strengthening those partnerships with families. And here's some ideas that are worth trying towards these goals. Number 1 is to increase the number of conferences throughout the year. Hear me out. I know this is a very tough first, idea to throw out there, but some folks have, more than 2 conferences a year, and that actually may be easier to condense the time that we're actually spending on conferences. So maybe having it 2 or 3 times a year, or even 4 times a year, now you can have more manageable conversations for 15 minutes at a time because you are consistently meeting with the families. When you only have 1 or 2 times a year, you may find that you need more time to speak with the families. So something to think about and consider. The other is to provide all conference materials in advance to promote dialogue. You'll see this tip come up a little bit later, and I fully wholeheartedly recognize that I've thrown out through 2 ideas that really just means more work for you right now, but trust me that this is really a great way to support those relationships with the families that you're hoping to build and maintain. And if you're already using Brightwheel, communicating, engaging with families is super simple and efficient. Families are more likely to see a Brightwheel message than they are to see an email. So leveraging something like parent messaging can really support you in building those connections with families on a daily basis. So today, we're not just sharing tips, but I'm also sharing our resources. This is a simple table that I created to help you organize yourself, your staff, and your families as you reflect and reimagine your conferences. You'll want to start by thinking about areas of improvements that you want to think about. So for example, we mentioned time and frequency, location, the conference forms, agenda, etc. Then you'll want to think about all the possible solutions that you can possibly come up with to help you make those changes in those areas, but then narrow it down to the best solution. And that means just the most practical solution. What is the solution that will give you the most impact for the least amount of effort, and that will help you really support the families and the staff, when they're actually in these conferences. So again, as you're involving others to reflect and give feedback, your staff and your families, it's always a good idea to pair that with brainstorming solutions so that you're not just getting a laundry list of things that can change and should change, but rather an actual solution that they are happy to move forward with. And one of the outcomes that we want to see as a result of rethinking of how we are going to conduct our family teacher conferences is that families are connected in meaningful ways. Ideally, you're building these relationships. You're having meaningful dialogues. The conferences are aligned with the family's needs for support and education. And conferences are feeling more like an opportunity to connect and build relationship and less like a chore for you and for the families. For tip number 2, I'm asking you to find 3 ways to engage families before conferences. This is all about building a culture of formal and informal conversations throughout the year. The number 3 may feel a little arbitrary, like I just picked that number from thin air, but the idea is to come up with more than one idea, one way that families can engage. Families need a variety of ways to engage and feel connected, right? And what works for one family may not work for another. So creating 3 opportunities for connections ensures that hopefully all families are engaged in the way that feels good to them. So why is this important? Well, engaging families before conferences allows you to build rapport with families and open those lines of communication or deepen those lines of communication before the actual conference. If conferences are the first real touch point with families in a year, those conversations will feel more about getting to know each other and building trust. And this is all work that you can do easily beforehand, so those conferences feel more productive and frankly less awkward for teachers and for families. So you'll want to have a combination of formal and informal conversations so families feel comfortable with the various types of communications ahead of conferences. For my next question, I'm curious to hear, what are you currently doing at your center to engage families prior to family teacher conferences? And it may be actual events that you are doing in preparation for family teacher conferences, or it may be something that you just have as touch points with families beforehand. Okay, assessments, sending home ASQs, absolutely. Super helpful. I love ASQs. And if you're not familiar with ASQs, or ages and stages questionnaires, they're parent type surveys that they have to fill out based on their child's development and what they're seeing. Daily conversations at pickup and drop off, activities and events, maybe perhaps in the classroom, Brightwheel messages, assessments. Wonderful. Doing weekly check-in with families to get a grasp on their needs. Yes. So a lot of folks are leveraging smaller communications, whether that be weekly, daily, to really support with that relationship building, which is all wonderful. Absolutely. Okay, great. And then keep those answers coming, because I think it's really helpful for folks to see how other folks are approaching these communications on a daily basis, the formal and the more informal ones. Okay, so let's get to the ideas. The goal of engaging families prior to conferences is that they can get better acquainted with the teachers and also their children's learning experience. Engaging families before conferences buys you time during your conferences. So that way you're not taking time to review what's going on in the classroom or what's happening in the classroom daily, but it helps you deepen those conversations to really get to the heart of what you're hoping to do, which is partner with that family to support that child's development. And so some of the informal things that you've all mentioned that you can be doing is, writing newsletters, messages, sending photos and videos, and holding special smaller events in the classroom. Some ideas worth really trying is to make an effort to connect with families that you don't see. Sometimes because of staff schedules, you may be missing a parent consistently every single day, or maybe they have different pickup and drop off arrangements that where grandpas and grandmas are involved, or maybe a nanny is involved. So if you're not getting FaceTime with these families, with the parents and guardians, I really recommend that you seek them out. Maybe you're giving them a call or you're sending them a Brightwheel message specifically to build rapport with this family. The next idea is to invite families into the classroom, and there are a variety of ways of doing this, right? You have curriculum night, you have back to school night, you can do a virtual tour of the classroom, you can do a video of the classroom. Families should have the opportunity to walk through the classroom and see all the wonderful work that you're doing firsthand, right? And sometimes drop off and pickup time is not a conducive time for families to do this intentionally. So another idea is to hold a gallery walk, right? You may have this on the day of conferences. Let's say you close school down for that day. Maybe you're having conferences in an office and your classroom is open, and the families can come in a little bit earlier just to walk around the classroom and take a look at all the wonderful things that you're doing in advance of your actual conference time. The next idea is to send out a special invitation. And this can look like a 15-second video of you or of the teachers or of the children in the classroom, letting families know that you're looking forward to conferences with them. You can have a conference countdown. That's a fun way to remind families that conferences are coming up and build some excitement around it. It doesn't have to be this dreaded conversation that sometimes we think of it as being like a report card in person, right? It can just be a much more casual event that you're looking forward to have with their families because you're building that connection and rapport. The last idea here is to do a pre-conference family survey. And I really love this idea. I've tried it many times myself. The idea here is to really allow families to ask questions and think about the things that they want to know in advance. So it helps them to intentionally prepare for your conferences. And it also helps you to create space for the family's voice in the conference, which I'll share a little bit more about later. So I also want to share that Brightwheel can help you send reminders and announcements to families before for any events that you may have leading up to conference and even conference day. And I know that you can all appreciate and know firsthand that families need all the reminders they can get throughout the year. Okay, so here's a sample pre-conference family survey for families to fill out. I created the survey so you don't have to. And the best part is that if you're currently using a Brightwheel, you can simply share this link and a message to your families on Brightwheel for them to fill it out. It's so much easier than preparing an email and hoping that your family see that email and then fill out that survey. So we will be sharing this pre-conference family survey and other templates throughout the webinar, bundled in one convenient checklist that Natalie will share with you at the end of the webinar. So hang tight as I share more of these types of templates and ways to support you. And again, the outcome here that we're hoping to see is that when families are engaged before conferences, families feel welcomed and valued. They feel informed about the life of the classroom. They feel safe to raise questions and concerns. And they're more curious to learn more because they have more information, but not the whole picture of what's happening in the classroom on a daily basis. For tip number 3, I can't stress this enough, have tough conversations before conferences. You don't want families to feel blindsided because that will erode trust and break down lines of communication literally within the conference. Families need to have the heads up that there are concerns, right? And they need the time to process this information, especially if it might be more sensitive information for the families or the first time that they're hearing it. Conferences should be a celebration of the child's developmental progress and discussion about next steps to continue to support their development. It should start and end on a positive note. Okay, so I want to hear from all of you and all the wisdom that you have. What's your best tip for starting a tough conversation with a family? Okay, starting off with the positives of the child first. Yes. And it looks like we're on the same page. A lot of folks are saying that that is the first step. Yes, always start off with the positive. Yes, this is make sure that it's not a surprise and the communication is happening daily. Absolutely. I'm seeing the compliment sandwich. Yes. Having a desire to come alongside the family, offering support, encouragement, and teamwork. Yes. Letting families know that you're there to walk them through it. I think that goes a long way. I'm not just sharing information, but I'm letting you know that you have a partner in me. I think that is wonderful. Oh, I love this. Frame it as something they do and something they and not something they are. That is so true. Children exhibit these behaviors, but not they're not the behaviors, right, themselves. Absolutely. Ask if they have concerns. Yes. Straight to the point. I appreciate this, Denise, because sometimes we do take a while to let families know why we're calling them and why we need to speak with them. And sometimes being very direct can be supportive. You just have to know your families and know exactly how they would appreciate that information. I do want to call out Perla's advice here to keep this information private. This is definitely true. Not the pickup and drop offs. It's not the time to be talking about these types of conversations. Absolutely. I love all of this advice. Please keep sharing it because such great advice and reminders for us all. And it looks like we're pretty much all in agreement that there needs to be some positivity there. And we certainly need to walk alongside our parents in this. Okay, so when we're approaching families with concerns regarding their children's behavior or development, the goal is for families to know their value, right, and also their responsibility in their child's life as their first and most important teacher. We also want families to learn to become advocates for their children. And family teacher conferences in early education are often where families learn to become advocates for their children in their educational journey. They learn how to partner with their children's teachers. That's us. And then, of course, with future teachers. And so we're really that training ground for families. But no pressure, right? So here are some ideas that we want to try out when we're thinking about having a tough conversation with families, and it's around conference time. You want to meet with that family 2 to 4 weeks before conferences regarding concerns. So that way there's enough time in between these conversations. Families don't feel overwhelmed by back-to-back conversation. At the same time, there's time to actually maybe think of ideas to implement. And so by conference time, you're talking about some improvements that you are seeing. And then once you've had those initial conversations with families, set a weekly or bi-weekly or monthly check-in with them so that you are closely partnering with them and so that they don't feel like this is something that is hanging over their heads and they're waiting for conferences for this humongous update about how their child is doing. And then may have heard me or other experts on our past webinars say that behaviors are a form of communication, right? And if you and your families are stuck on what that child is communicating with their behaviors, take the opportunity to collaborate on an ABC behavior chart, which I'll share a little bit later as a resource. And similarly, you can collaborate on a strengths chart with the family. So catching or tracking the child's positive or desirable behaviors. So I'll share what that looks like too a little bit later. And it goes in line with sharing positives with families as well. Lastly, I highly recommend creating a network of trusted developmental specialists in your area. As a previous director, it was really important to me to build these relationships with pediatric occupational therapists, speech therapists, physical therapists, because if I needed to share that information with a family, I can give them a name of a person that I personally had a relationship with, and I can create a warm handoff, right, from our services to the family, to these occupational therapists or speech therapist services for the family, so that it felt a little bit less scary for the family. And I do advise noticed that having these folks just in and around the community, maybe doing a guest speaking event for families and parenting classes could be really supportive, so that the conversations around bringing in an expert or a specialist doesn't feel as scary for families when you are talking about referrals for evaluations or even therapy. Okay, so for our first resource, I want to share this informative blog we wrote on how to handle difficult parent conversations at your preschool. Natalie's going to go ahead and share that link to the blog in the chat so that you have direct access to it. And I also want to encourage you to subscribe to our blog to stay on top of all the latest content that we have, if you haven't already. We'll cover all topics related to running your programs, using Brightwheel, and resources for teachers as well. And here's the ABC chart that I had mentioned earlier. It's a great way to objectively track behaviors and share them with families. An ABC chart is an acronym that stands for antecedent, behavior, and consequence. The chart includes descriptions of what you should be noting for the antecedent, for the behavior, and for the consequence. And I also included a column at the very end for ideas of how you might support the behavior next time. The reason for this is that sometimes we see trends in the behavior, and we understand that this behavior really is communicating this. So instead, I'm going to try this to prevent the behavior next time. So just keeping track of some of the ideas that you have might be helpful. You can choose to do this for a week of observation or another predetermined amount of time. You can fill it out at school while the families fill it out at home. And then you can share your observations to really collaborate on the next steps. And here's a strengths chart that I also wanted to share with you. Again, sometimes in the thick of dealing with a lot of challenging behaviors and communicating with families about these challenging behaviors, we fail to kind of see where the child is actually doing really well, right? What are their strengths? Where they're excelling. And so we want to be able to also approach families with these positive updates. And so sometimes taking note of it is really important too. And you can say, hey, look, this past week, the child did really well. And they were really exhibiting these, amazing behaviors. And we really want to make sure that we are reinforcing those behaviors and supporting them. And so it's just a great way to reflect and cultivate that child's strengths. So by having these tough conversations with families before conferences, we are encouraging active and frequent dialogue. We are trusting families to be strong partners. We are providing information that sets families up for success and ready to take action. And then perhaps more importantly, we are recognizing that families are experts of their children, and that when we're communicating that we cannot do this work without their support. For tip number 4, I want to say this is an important tip that I'm hoping that everyone will really take note of, and then that is making space for the family's voice in the conference. The first step to doing this is, of course, a pre-conference survey, as I mentioned earlier. But beyond that, making space is also an attitude, an approach to how you lead the conversation with the families during conferences. So one of the unspoken challenges of conference season is just the sheer number of families that you have lined up to speak with you in such a short period of time. And that can be overwhelming, like just from a social emotional perspective, and how that feels for you to enter one conversation after the other. It's a bit unnatural, and it's not something that we do typically. So just calling that out and realizing that could be overwhelming sometimes can help us understand that pushes us to quickly move through sharing information and not leaving much room for a conversation. So I want to share one of my favorite quotes. It's an African proverb, and it says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So it's worth slowing down to make space for the family voice and not just rushing through a conference so that we can get to the next one. The other thing to keep in mind is that for so many families, their frame of reference for conferences may be from a time when families played a less active role during the conference, meaning they sit down, they get the information from the teacher, conference is now done. So in a lot of ways, we have to be explicit and intentional with our invitation for families so that they know exactly what is expected of them and how we are hoping they will participate in the conversation. So just know that this may take some time, some practice. It may not come easy to the families, and frankly, it may not come easy to you, and that's okay. But the idea is just to acknowledge that there's some room for improvement in this space. Okay, so here's another question for you. What are some current challenges you are experiencing around conference season? Again, I hope you all feel this is a safe space to share what it is that you are all, challenged by these days. Too much going on and holidays. Yes, that is very true. We definitely have that first conference in the fall in between holidays, and that can be really tough. Finding the time, no shows, yes. Schools having their own conferences, yes, other schools, right? And other families having conferences with other older age children, absolutely. The time and the prep, my goodness, yes, the prepping can be overwhelming, absolutely. Parents not responding to the RSVPs, yes, are not seeing the value in these meetings, absolutely. And sometimes we have to be intentional about letting families know, why are we having conferences? Not just take it for granted that conferences exist as part of our educational, experiences, but explain to families why it is important. Many families are insisting remote or Zoom conferences. Yes, and that may feel different, right? Some folks don't like it, some folks like it more. And so it just really is getting in touch with what it is that you're feeling about it, what feels good about it, and what doesn't feel good about it, and how you can come to a compromise. Getting the courage to actually talk about the difficult parts of a child's development and their progress. Yes, hopefully, Caitlin, we're talking about this and we're saying that we're having these conversations in advance. So when you're getting to the conference, you're feeling much more at ease and much better about that. These are all great, and I know these are really tough and real challenges. But what I'm saying, what's great about it is that we're sharing it out loud when we're saying it, and we are thinking about how this impacts our conference season. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of these. And again, keep those responses coming. So the goal for the day of conference is for families to look forward to the conversation with their teachers. They should be clear on the agenda and ready to participate with questions, comments, and solutions. Here are some ideas worth trying. Avoid sitting behind a desk or a table. This is huge because oftentimes we see that as being the setup, but seating arrangement can go a long way in creating a welcoming environment and for it to feel less isolating for the for the parents. So it doesn't feel like they're in trouble or they're about to get information from an authority figure, but more if it's a collaborative conversation. Ask questions to encourage families to share new information. We will share some of these conversation starters if you need some ideas in our next slide. Provide opportunities for families to respond to what you're sharing. So that just means simply making space again for families to respond. You can maybe take a longer pause, ask them a follow-up question, something that allows them to share their reaction to the information that you're sharing. Share completed conference forms before the conference. I know that, again, this is overwhelmingly a big ask, but the more information families have before the conference, the more they can actively participate in that conversation because they've had time to process what you will be sharing. Otherwise, you might find yourself sharing new information and watching families process in real time. And that usually means that there's going to be a lot of silence because we all process differently, and silence is sometimes a byproduct of the way that we process information. And whenever possible, please, have an interpreter when needed, or have families invite an interpreter that can help them to really actively participate in that conversation. And I really want to quickly call out that Brightwheel is making it easier than ever to support and improve family-teacher partnerships with our communication and learning tools that work cohesively to engage families and save teachers time in and out of the classroom. So for example, with our student portfolios, you can easily share digital collections of artifacts, photos, videos, observations, and notes that you've been taking throughout the time that you've been working with your children, that brings families into their children's world at school and how they are progressing. And coming soon, this process will be even easier with more streamlined portfolio templates. So stay tuned for that. And if you're currently using Brightwheel and you're taking photos and videos of your children learning experiences regularly, creating digital portfolios will be a super breeze for you, and you can do that today if you wanted to. And if you're just starting out with Brightwheel and just beginning to take photos and videos of your children, my recommendation is that this is a great time to increase that documentation of your children's learning so that you can make your digital portfolios in time for conferences, whether this fall or next spring, depending on your timing. And then student portfolios is just an example of an artifact that you can share with families ahead of time to deepen that conversation with your families. Okay, so for the first resource here, I want to share some simple questions that you can ask families to learn more about their child from their perspective. The first question is, what do you find most surprising about your child? What is there a side of your child that we haven't seen yet? You know, for many of you, it is the beginning of the school year. Maybe you're working with this child for the very first time. And so it'll be interesting to hear what the family's perspective is on how this child shows up at school versus at home. When you think about your child, what makes you proud? And what's your favorite activity to do with your child? So all these questions allow families to really share their perspective and open up. And families do want to share, you know, what they experience with their children. And these are just great ways to have those lines of communication opened up. Okay, and if you're looking to revamp your conference forms, you may be interested in our easy-to-use form that really does make space for the family voice. So it was designed with a lot of intentionality for that family voice to be present in the family conference form. Each section has suggested instructions for how you might want to approach filling out the questions that we ask. And again, we're making a copy available in the checklist that you will be provided at the end with. Okay, and when families are given a voice, the outcome is that we are communicating that they are a vital partner to their child's development as problem solvers and experts on their child. So for tip number 5, we are starting exactly how we're ending our conference exactly how we're starting our conference season, which is really emphasizing that connection, right? And so we want to capitalize on all the connections that you've been making before and during conferences so you can build stronger relationship with families. Connections is really the gift that keeps on giving when we nurture it. So once again, we want to focus on formal and informal ways to do this. And the last question of our webinar, I would like to hear from you. If you fast forward to your next conference season, presumably in the spring, what would be some of the wins that you'll be looking forward to see with families? So just imagine yourself in the spring sitting down with your families again. What are some wins that you want to see? Accomplish goals for the students. Absolutely. Yes. Open conversations with their families and lives. Yes. Comfort levels and easy communication. Yes. That sense of like, you know, we understand each other. We know each other. We have this open lines of communication. Improvement in development, new skills. Absolutely. Kindergarten readiness. Better communication for conferences and accomplished goals. More support with the parents. Absolutely. Increase engagement and social and academic skills, healthy relationships with the families, parents looking forward to it as something they'll enjoy and get a lot out of and not a chore. Yes, Crystal, absolutely. Yeah, these are all great. And I share that vision for you too. And I wholeheartedly believe that it is possible, that you can definitely attain this. And it will take some time and it will take some muscle, you know, to kind of go in there and stretch and flex, but it can happen. So keep this vision that you have for yourself and for your families, and even share that vision with your families and your teachers, because it's important for them to know where you're hoping these conversations to lead and go. Okay, so here is the goal that we want. We want our connections with our families that we've been doing prior and during conferences to help us build high-level connections, right, throughout the year. And here are some ideas that are worth trying. I'm calling them the 3 Fs, so it's easier to remember. You want to follow up, personally connect with each family after conferences. This is a must. You don't want to leave anybody hanging, especially if you have next steps that you were hoping to take or things that you're you've asked the parents to do, or things that you promised the parents that you would do. You want to follow up with families. Number 2 is feedback. Send out a family survey. You did it at the beginning of conference. Now do it at the end. How did the conference feel? Was there any areas that we can be improving on? This is huge. Not only do families feel like their voice is important, but you can actually implement some change based on their responses and the needs that they have that weren't met. Fellowship. Capitalize on your connection with a fun-filled community event. Because you're dead smack in the middle of holidays and a lot of celebrations, this is a great time to really get families excited about being together in community. So maybe think about something that you can do for the holidays that would be supportive to building that relationship. And you can help families stay connected and stay on top of social special events in your program with our updated school calendar that families can easily access through their Brightwheel app. So just make sure to use that to your advantage too, if you're hoping families to remain more connected to what's happening at school. Okay, so some of our resources here, and the very first one that I want to share is that I wanted to take out the guesswork of how and what to say to families as you're trying to build those relationships. If you have a really urgent matter to discuss with families, especially if it's a follow-up after the conference, you want to give them a call. I think that's the best way to go about dealing with any urgent matters, is to pick up the phone and call a person. At least less for interpretation, and you can always deal with things right there and then. For a medium to top priority follow-up, you can always opt for something written like an email, but just know that it can be kind of lengthy. And to be honest, a lot of families miss emails and don't always respond. And then also for super low priority follow-ups, things that you just want to use for connection, but not necessarily to inform a family, you may want to consider a personalized note that that's handwritten by you. I know that's really old-fashioned, maybe a little bit time-consuming, but I think that it's so unexpected that it may catch families by surprise in a good way for them to read something that you have personally written for them. And I have like a little bit of a script, if you will, to get you started. And then last, but certainly not least, and perhaps the easiest and most convenient way to communicate with families is via, Brightwheel's parents messaging. It's super quick. You don't need to write very much because it feels very much like a text, and families are more likely to see it and respond. So you can connect with families in a matter of minutes, maybe even during nap time. So just making sure that you're thinking about the various ways that you can connect with families, and making sure that you're using the right medium for connection. So that way it's actually, reaching them on time. Okay, so here's a sample post-conference family survey for families to fill out. Again, I created this survey so that you don't have to. You can simply send a link in a Brightwheel message to families. If there are questions here that you want to modify or change, you'll be receiving a copy of this so that you can change it however you wish. And it's all through Google Forms, so it's super easy to provide this to families to fill out. We'll again share this checklist with you that contains all of these templates, including the survey. Okay, so for our last resource here, it is a sample community flyer that I made on Canva. Community events are really great for so many reasons. Like I mentioned earlier, families are often looking for age-appropriate events for their little ones. They are looking to socialize with other parents who are in the same, life stage that they're in as well. And the right community events can help families feel bonded to each other and to their teachers and to the school as a whole. It can support family engagement and a sense of belonging to your learning community, and it can help them become more active and more involved. So flyers should be attractive and informative, not too much information, aesthetically, beautiful, but everyone has their own aesthetic, so you do what you feel is beautiful. But a little help from Canva doesn't hurt, and I just wanted to show you how easy it would be to create a beautiful flyer for an event that you may be having or planning after conferences. The last outcome is that families feel like a part of a community when they're looking for informal and formal ways to engage them. And this really leads to family feeling more motivated, connected to others, feeling willing to participate in big and small ways, feeling more likely to attend relevant events, and feeling less likely to decline personal invitations from you all. And that is, in essence, our presentation for today. I do want to make some time for Q&A, as I promised earlier. And while you're thinking of your questions, please put it in the Q&A. I already have some questions that I'll be answering. And I also want to take this time for Natalie to be able to share the Family Teacher Conference checklist in the chat so that you have access to all of the templates and all of the resources that we share today. Okay, so I'll get started here with our first question. It says here, would you recommend for a teacher who is new, what would you recommend for a teacher who is new leading a conference? So I'm assuming this is more like tips that you would want to use to support a new teacher. And I think one of the things that I really used and was really supportive and helpful is to role play. Sometimes what's most scariest about a conference is what you will say and do and how you will respond. So I think it's helpful to have an agenda, B, role play through that agenda, and then you as a director acting as that parent, asking the questions or making the comments that typically come up during a conference. So lots of role play, talking to a more seasoned teacher who have been doing this for longer is super helpful. If a teacher from a previous class or age group has had experience with this particular parent and you're maybe have some concerns about how this conference will go with this family, leaning into those experiences will be super helpful too as well. So just as much practice as a person can get will be supportive. And if it were me and if it were my teacher, I would also plan to be in the conference so that way I can support the teacher should they get stuck. The next question here is, what is the best way to keep track of time and end a conference on time? This is really huge. And I saw earlier that someone had mentioned that they don't have a time limit, and that's great if you can figure it out. For many of us during the day, conferences are happening, throughout the day while class is still in session. And so it's really tough to keep them on track. Personally, I loved hourglasses just because you can buy them in different increments on Amazon, 45 minutes, an hour, 30 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever time increment you need. It wasn't intrusive. It wasn't an alarm. It wasn't a jarring, this is the time has come. Everyone can keep an eye on the actual hourglass and then say, okay, we're nearing the time of, the end of our conference. How do we want to wrap this up? So I liked hourglasses. That was really supportive and helpful. And I also like building buffers in between the conference times. So if one is ending at 12 o'clock, the next one begins at 12:05. Not having it so close to each other is super helpful as well. And then another question that I have here is, how do you support families living in separate households? Do you have separate conferences? This is a good question and a really, sensitive question depending on what that family's arrangement is. Some families don't wish to be in the same room with each other, and so it may make it difficult to have an in-person conference altogether. It is best, if at all possible, to have the same time together, whether that be on Zoom, and if families can do it in person together. So that way you're not sharing different information with different families and different parents, and certainly not having to repeat yourself and double your efforts. However, there are times where it is absolutely necessary to have different arrangements. And so in these circumstances, you definitely do want to do what's best for the family. Ask them what feels comfortable to them, let them know what you're able to do, and make sure that it is a compromise that feels good for everyone. Okay, and that is about all the time that we have for questions. These are great questions and I appreciate them all. I do want to move on so you can get your certificate of attendance, and then we can officially wrap up. Okay. So again, thank you so much for attending our webinar. I'm excited to share your certificate with you now. You can go to the link that Natalie is going to share with you in the chat. It is mybrightwheel.com webinar 101123. Again, it's mybrightwheel.com/webinar 101123. So you're going to go ahead and click on that certificate, fill in your own name, and then save it for your own records. I'm going to linger here for just a little bit to make sure that we all have time to click on that and access your certificate. Okay, hopefully everyone has had a chance to click on it and have access to their certificate. And when you close out of today's webinar, our survey will automatically pop up to your screen. So if you can take a minute or two to fill it out, I would greatly appreciate it. I would love to hear your thoughts on today's session. If you have any suggestions for today's session or future webinars, I would love to hear it. So please let me know. More than anything, I want to create wonderful and amazing webinars for you, things that are really, truly helpful for you all in the hard work that you do. So please let me know how I can be of service. And please fill out that survey. It will take you a minute or two, I promise. Thank you so, so much for doing that. And if you're not yet using Brightwheel, but you're interested to learn more about how Brightwheel can help you at your center, please do request a demo. You can do so at mybrightwheel.com/webinar-demo. You'll fill out a quick form and someone from our team will reach out to you, do a customized walkthrough with you and answer all of your questions. So again, that is mybrightwheel.com/webinar-demo to schedule a customized call. And we have officially reached the end. Thank you so much for joining us. We sincerely appreciate all the hard work that you do. And we hope that you took away some tips for re-energizing your family teacher conferences this year. Thank you so much.